Hi guys, this was a brilliant takedown of Richard Tice and Brexiteers. So for years, he and his boss Nigel Farage had talked about how it was necessary to leave the EU in order to escape what they called a sinking ship. They convinced the public through lies and deceit that their lives would be better off if they voted to leave. That a whole new world awaited Britain if it focused less on France and Germany and more on Commonwealth countries, Asia, and of course the United States. But as this man points out, as soon as a deal is done with India and the US, Tice and people like him start complaining.
I just find it incredible what Richard Tice is saying there, because what we've seen with Brexit, under every single metric, our country is poorer. It's a fact. And everything we're trying to do on the outside of that is just, nibbling away at the edges. So when people say we have no money in our pockets, Brexit and what you stood for has caused that.
Absolute nonsense.
And then when you talk...
Hang on. Richard, you have to let people have their say. You've had a long speech already. Yeah. We have to hear what other people have to say. Yes.
And then when you're talking about an Indian trade deal being an issue, hang on a minute. I thought you said we're supposed to trade with the rest of the world. There's big opportunities. And as soon as there's a deal with another country, then yet you're complaining about it. Like, it's hypocrisy at its finest. And I think, we've been duped. We've been duped as a nation. Brexit was the biggest con to enforce economic sanctions on ourselves, and it's affected every single facet of life, and that's a fact. And I know there's a lot of Brexit remorse. It's not about it's not about ideology towards the European Union or anything like that. They're our closest trading partner, and we've lost so much because of it, and we're suffering because of it, and that's a fact. Now, when people say we knew what we voted for, this is what we voted for, guys. We voted to make ourselves poorer in the name of perceived sovereignty. Now, for me, that's the issue.
Wonderful speech. And he's completely correct. Look, if we go back to before the referendum, Farage and Tice and others are saying, look, if we leave the European Union, we're going to be better off. The European Union is sinking. We need to get out of that. We need to abandon that sinking ship. And as soon as the UK left, they said, see, Brexit has been a success. But then as it became clear that it was not a success, that it was imposing economic sanctions on Britain and that businesses were struggling, what was their response then? Well, the Tories are not implementing Brexit correctly. It's not the problem was not Brexit, it was the type of Brexit that the Conservatives backed or were implementing, which of course was supported by Nigel Farage at the time. Remember, Farage stood down candidates of the Brexit Party to help Boris Johnson over the line, to help him implement Brexit. And Farage, as soon as that was happening, was celebrating the type of Brexit that Boris Johnson had negotiated. Now we're in a situation where they're saying, well, Brexit once again isn't the problem. It's the Conservatives not implementing it correctly. And now that the Labour Party are in power and they're implementing the exact same Brexit, remember that Nigel Farage celebrated, they're complaining. See, they're not interested in trade deals. They're not interested in trade in general. This is about convincing the public to vote against their own interests. And what are those interests? It's about protecting them through standards, through regulations. These are the things that Reform UK want to get rid of. They don't care that much about the EU. They don't even care that much about immigration. They're using both of these issues as tools to deregulate. Because who benefits from deregulation? Corrupt business owners, corrupt business people, people who don't want to pay taxes, people who certainly don't want to see their taxes going to help the most vulnerable in society. They don't want workers protected. They're anti-trade union, even though they pretend to be on the side of trade unions. They're anti-regulations to protect the environment, to protect consumers. They love the idea of importing hormone-treated beef and chlorinated chicken, because they're not going to be eating it, somebody else will. So they need to be called out. They're charlatans. And unfortunately, it requires some guy sitting in the audience of a Question Time show to call them out, because the media is not doing that. The media has completely failed. And now it seems the media is determined to get Nigel Farage into number 10. One thing is platforming someone. Another is platforming them and not challenging them. And unfortunately, we're seeing too much of that at the moment. So Brexit has been an absolute disaster. It should be an albatross around the neck of Richard Tice and Nigel Farage, and to a significant extent the Conservatives as well. But the media is not really talking about it, and the Labour government certainly aren't.